Well, thank you guys for coming out, braving the weather and the commute and everything like that. I really appreciate it. And one of the things we're going to talk about, and something that I strive to do every day, is to help people tell stories better. And I know that it resonates well with what you guys do every day. You're surrounded by all these amazing stories. But I want to talk in depth a little bit about exactly what they are and how they work. So I want to start off by telling you a dirty little secret about the marketing world. The marketing world and the creative world, it's shockingly ineffective, all right? We are bombarded by so much media all day, and one of the big reasons it becomes shockingly ineffective is because of all the noise. We're surrounded by noise. We have social media, we have Twitter notifications, text messages, email notifications, we're getting junk mail in the mail. There's so much stuff going on in our lives that we've become really adept at filtering the noise, right? I think even Ben mentioned this, is like that point where you're bombarding people with so many emails that they just ignore you, right? And then it has a lot less to do with what you have to say and the fact that you never even got the opportunity to be able to talk to them. And I think there's a solution out there, and I think that solution is wrapped up in story time. I got little kids, and they go to the library, and we have story time. And there's a distinctive change in their behavior between pre-story time and during story time. I don't think we change from that. There's that wild, crazy running around, everything's going nuts. But then when story time happens, everybody gets their carpet squares, and you sit down, and you absorb this information. It's fun. It's entertaining. And so I want to sort of reveal the fact that stories are really all around us. Stories are movies. I'm gonna come over here. Every movie is a story, right? It's an entertainment. We voluntarily give people money to have them tell us a story. Sports, right? Without a story surrounding sports, ESPN would not exist, let's be honest, all right? There's only so much sports to physically just watch out there. The story surrounding sports, the backstories, there's a reason there's like 12 hours of programming on Super Bowl Sunday, and it's not because the game's 12 hours long, right? It's because we created 8 to 10 hours of this content that we're surrounding this whole thing around. We're building up this story around something. Even news, right? It's called a news story, right? A breaking news story is happening. It's a story. We're structuring data in ways that people are used to digesting. Music. Every song out there has a story behind it, right? There's something to say. We're communicating with people. History in itself is actually a story, right? It's how we've communicated our history as a culture. It's how we communicate back before there was written word. There was verbal word that was passed down. Cave paintings, those are all storytelling processes. Even gossip. I read a stat that like 85% of our communication happens through storytelling, right? I was on the drive-in this morning. I was stuck on I-71 for about an hour and a half, right? There's this person, I couldn't believe what they were doing. They're texting there while they're driving. Little interactions between people end up taking the form of a story. We don't even notice it anymore. But the real question is, why do stories work so well? And this is really interesting because I started studying into this a little bit. I think there's a natural inclination that like stories are just more entertaining, they're easier to digest things, but there's actually some physical things going on. Our brains are wired for stories. We've had years and years and years of culture. We've had a lot of things happen chemically that change our brains when we're interacting through a story. So content alone typically engages our language center of our cortex of our brain. But let me tell you, last night I had this amazing raspberry chocolate cake. And I was over with some friends. We're having a nice time. There's this raspberry chocolate cake sitting there. Nobody was digging into it because there was no like fork or knife or anything like that. And finally, I had enough, and I took a big old spoon. I scooped out this big piece of it. And I'm telling you, it was probably the highlight of my entire day yesterday. See, when we hear a story about something, our brains actually put us in the mode that we're actually experiencing what we just heard. So if you're hearing a story about food, you're actually experiencing in your brain the same sort of like conscious level of actually eating that food, right? If you hear a story about energy or motion, the same cortexes kick in as if you're actually doing that running or actively in that sport. I think that's why sports are so popular to view and to watch and not necessarily to play, right? There's a lot of people who love watching sports but don't play sports. It's because they're feeling like they're participating, like they're part of that whole entire process. Our brains experience stories as if we are participants in the story, right? You go to a movie, you sit down, you watch the movie, you feel like you're part of that world. You feel like you're participating. And we typically identify ourselves with some certain people in those stories. And last, I think it has a lot to do with building trust. We're a culture that uses storytelling as our main communication platform, and it helps us to establish this trust level between people. I'm a real person, you're a real person, we can trust each other. Even in a blind sort of exchange in social media or something like that, where there isn't a personal connection, if you change it around to be a story structure, you're able to add personality to it. It's so much easier to trust a person than a thing. So let's talk about stories as a whole. Stories are not collections of facts, right? We have a lot of factual information that we have to get across in the daily life, but stories have some distinctive things, and they have characters. So this is a great quote. A great story has more to do with emotion and narrative and building relationships with your audience than just the raw data, right? Otherwise, we wouldn't have actors. We would just all read scripts all day, right? So what about the structure of a story? This is something that you can apply, whether it's a tweet, whether it's a newsletter, your annual reports. This is something that's going to flow into videos, into posters. There always has to be a villain, all right? Think about all the great movies or literature or anything that you've ever heard. There's always a villain, and that villain may not necessarily be a person. It might be a thing, right? It might be a disease. It might be something that you're raising money against to be able to help. It might be poverty, right? There's always a villain out there. And with every good villain, there has to be a hero. I want to talk about this a little bit, is because a lot of times we think that maybe the hero is us as the company, right? But the reality is that your donors are the heroes. And if you can cast a story where your donors are able to beat the villain, you're taking them on a journey. So every hero has to have a journey. Every hero has to go down this process and to be able to come out someplace else. And there always has to be a reward at the end. And it actually breaks down. Almost all stories have the same exact structure. There's a big villain. There's an issue that comes up. They have to overcome the issue. It flows through romance, action, sci-fi. They all have very similar story structures. So what are some tips on how we can develop stories better for our purposes? Well, let's start off with the purpose, right? Stories have to fit into a bigger picture of what your organization is trying to do. Your organization may have one overarching big storyline, but then every communication you have after that needs to reinforce that same storyline. What is your purpose in life? Why are you here? And all these little puzzle pieces, from an individual tweet to a video to a, like I said, poster, donor interaction, how you answer the phone, all they end up doing is building up that big picture story. Along with that, you have to stay focused. People are bombarded with all this information, and so we have to be concise. We can't expect people to absorb everything that you know, because you guys work and do this all every day. They have busy lives, and they can only have an attention span that can absorb so much information in so much period of time. So the more we know our audience, which I think we talked about a little bit today as well, of trying to gather this data and metrics and things like that, the more that we know our audience, the more that we can actually talk to their specific needs. If we don't know who our hero is, then we can't sort of appeal to his need or her needs. And then we always try to put yourself in their shoes. If I were sitting and watching a presentation, I would rather sit and watch a presentation that's quick and fast and gets to the point, and entertains me, than just sort of bombards me with data, right? The people that you're talking to are real people just like you and me, and they deserve sort of our attention to that fact. And that leads into this. Stories themselves are about people, not about things, right? So you can tell a story about cancer, but the story isn't about cancer. The story is about cancer survivors or cancer victims, or people who are overcoming this process. People are always the key central place that we need to land in their story. So pictures and visuals are a huge part of storytelling. Even when we're talking verbally, they're painting pictures in the back of our head. And so the old adage that a picture paints 1,000 words is no more true than when we're doing storytelling online, offline, or through any other marketing. So charts and graphs, this is something that can be pretty controversial when you get into presentations and reports, things like that. Here's an opportunity to be able to use visuals to be able to turn data actually into stories themselves. So I want to point out the details always matter, right? Spelling, attention to detail, how you structure things. If you don't catch it, someone else will. So I want to look at maybe a couple examples here. I'm going to skip through real quick. We have a couple of videos that I'm going to put up so you can see a little bit of like storytelling that we focus on sometimes. But I'm going to show you an example here real quick. So this is a piece that we did for United Way in the Medina County area. And this is their annual report. And we actually did something a little bit different for them. We actually built an annual report that was a poster instead of a traditional annual report. And it was all based around this theme, the story that they were talking about, which is growing together. And so they're trying to set a foundation for this new transition that they're going through, away from sort of an older style fundraising to a newer style method. And it went over very well and created a lot of intrigue over it. No pun intended. So let me show a couple of videos to you real quick here. All right, so this first one is more of a traditional ad. It played on TV and online, and it's for First and Main in the Hudson area. That's a shopping center. And it's actually a 15-second. We did 2 different 15-second pieces, but it's very, very story-heavy. But I wanted to put it up there because I wanted to show how much story you could tell in just 15 seconds of airtime. So I know that went by very fast, but the reality is that we were attempting to tell a story about a family, 3 generations that were taking the opportunity to go out on sort of an annual shopping day, right? And the overarching story is that First and Main isn't just some other mall or some other shopping center. That's an experience that allows you to sort of get back to what the core of what the holiday season is supposed to be about. And so we had a spot like that. We had another spot that was about a date night. And a husband and wife were able to get away and spend a little bit of time together. And again, it went back to this overarching story that we were trying to establish with this experience-based shopping. So the last one I want to show you here, real quick, is a piece that we did for a nonprofit called Ears to You. They do. They provide earrings for patients that are in the middle of chemotherapy. And it's a former cancer survivor who started this process because when she was having her chemo and all of her hair was falling out, that for her it was that little touch of home that she was able to get. And so she's built a nonprofit. They're giving away thousands and thousands of earrings to people. They're actually expanding out into hats for men as well. And so we built a little piece for her just showing her backstory.
first realized something was going wrong with my body, and I was nursing my youngest son. Something didn't feel right. I went to the doctor. Nobody really thought it was anything. We decided to wait on it. Waited a couple more months. I got a little bit more nervous about it. Decided to get a biopsy done, and cancer was confirmed. I started treatment towards the end of that month, and by the time I went in for my second treatment, I did lose my hair. I could feel it falling out. When I was in the hospital and feeling sort of down about my own appearance, I realized when my husband brought a lot of the things that I enjoy wearing, such as earrings and a wig and makeup, I started to think this could be something. I had been thinking for a while about how could I help other women? How could I help other women going through treatment stay positive, feel good about themselves? And I remember even praying on it, saying, God, I really want to be able to do something. Even though I was still going through treatment at the moment, I just felt really led to do something. And I feel like that was when Ears 2 was born, when I realized earrings could be that gift. Earrings could be the thing that I give to other women, to be able to say, you can do this, you can stay positive, and you can feel good about where you are right now and how you look.
What does it mean to you that Ruth, who's the person who put us together, is a former survivor herself?
She knows. She really does. Ruth and I first met when our kids were in preschool, and she was one of my jewelry customers back then. And when I found out that she had breast cancer, I was sad for her. And our friendship continued. And when she had first came to me with the idea of Ears 2 and said, could you supply the earrings, for this nonprofit organization, I was on board from day one. I said, I think it's a great idea. I think it has great potential of touching a lot of different women. We have fun together, and we know that we're helping other women in the meantime, so it just comes easy to us to be together, and we have similar visions as far as what we want to do in the future together, so it just works out really well.
I thank you for starting this program, and I think it really has impacted so many of our women going through treatment in such a positive way. And sometimes chemo can be negative, but here was a very easy, fun tool that I could use that's really helped women as they go through the whole cancer journey.
I've heard from patients as well as the people that take care of the patients, the social workers and the nurses, and they tell me what a positive impact the patients have when they receive this beautiful gift from Ears 2, and they feel great. It's a pleasure to be associated with Ears 2.
Realizing that what we are doing, albeit very small, makes a difference to a woman at a time when she's not feeling great is what makes me keep going. Even when I'm tired or having one of those days where I'm hitting a lot of brick walls, I realize that when I meet those patients, I can tell how much it means to them. They help a woman feel better about herself, her appearance, which then helps her feel better about her outlook, which helps her begin to be more positive about her outcomes, and helps her, I think, and I hope, to be more positive overall about her treatment and her care.
So I think it's a great example on both sides where we have a longer period of time, right? And that might not fit everybody's social media strategy to have a longer video like that. But for her, this was an opportunity for her to tell the entirety of her story as she's going through this process. And when that video was made, that was actually a few years ago, one of the main purposes was to be able to gain traction with hospitals and to be able to show hospitals the benefit of what she was doing and be able to gain entrance and to be able to participate and work together with them. And so she's been using it since then. We're actually in the process of building out a new version so we can include hats as well. She's expanding out. I think she said she was in like 18 hospitals across the Northeast Ohio region right now. And so that's going to be a shorter piece because that's more intended to drive donation. So that's going to be a 1 minute, 1.5 minute piece. But I think what I really want to encourage you guys is you have a huge opportunity to be able to go out there and tell your story, right? Tell it in small pieces, tell it in larger pieces. But we have an opportunity to be agents of change. And in a world full of noise, to be able to give people out there the opportunity to be able to do something great, do something good, and to be able to contribute and participate with you guys and be that hero that we all need those heroes in our organizations to come alongside us and help us with. I think one of the key ways to do that is to get out there, be honest with them, and tell the stories that are already there.